What's up, everybody? My name is Brad, and today I've got another book review for you guys, and I'm going to be talking about Full Moon by Jim Butcher, and this is book 2 in his Dresden Files series. Like book 1, I listened to this one on audiobook as well, and I'm probably going to listen to the whole series on audiobook. It's a very entertaining, fantastic experience. It's narrated by James Marsters, who is famous from the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I never watched that show. Don't hate me too much in the comments. But I feel like there's a big difference when an actor comes in to do an audiobook, bringing all that actor training and background to the emotions and character work and voice inflections and whatnot to the narration, compared to just having a narrator come in and reading it and trying to do different voices. Having an actor do it, it raises the production up to a whole other level, in my opinion. And James Marsters does a fantastic job. If you're looking to get into the Dresden Files, I suggest you do the audiobook version, go that route. They're great. Or maybe if you're wanting to reread them again, I know Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative, she's rereading them, but listening to them on audiobook, and I know she's really enjoying the audiobook experience as well. Let's go ahead and I'll read the synopsis for you guys real quick, and then I'll get into my thoughts and everything about the book. You'd think there'd be a little more action for the only professional wizard listed in the Chicago phone book. But lately, Harry Dresden hasn't been able to dredge up any kind of work, magical, mundane, or menial. Just when it looks like he can't afford his next meal, a murder comes along that requires his particular brand of supernatural expertise. There's a brutally mutilated corpse and monstrous animal markings at the scene. Not to mention that the killing took place on the night of a full moon. Harry knows exactly where this case is headed. Take 3 guesses, and the first 2 don't count. So, as I said, this is book 2 in the series. It still feels like it can stand on its own. It is a complete story from beginning to end. And if you're just wanting a fun, entertaining werewolf book, I think you can jump in and just read this book by itself, and it'll still make sense, and you'll still get enjoyment out of it. It does reference events from the first book, and there are returning characters from book 1, like Karen Murphy and John Marconi and whatnot. But it is enough of a standalone still, this book 2, that I think you can read it by itself and still have a fun, enjoyable experience. That said, I do think you will get more out of it if you would have read book 1. It does reference the events of book 1 throughout. There are returning characters that we would already have previous attachments to, either whether we liked them or didn't like them from book 1. So yeah, you can read this as a standalone, but you'll get more out of it if you would have read book 1. Like the synopsis says, this takes place, I think, about 6 months after book 1, Stormfront, and I do have a review for that one already. I'll link it up here in the cards. Dresden and Murphy, they sort of had a bit of a falling out after the events of book 1. She works with the police department, and Dresden's usually like a contractor or an advisor, comes in and helps with certain cases that seem more supernatural than just, normal crimes that he's able to assist with. And that's a lot of his income. So he hasn't had any contact with Murphy for a while until this murder comes up. It's sort of bizarre and outside of what would be considered normal. So he comes in to assist Karen once again, Karen Murphy, and it looks like a werewolf attack. It happened on the full moon. There's like these huge wolf prints all over the crime scene. The body is just completely eviscerated and mutilated. So it looks like a werewolf has done this. And that leads on into the rest of the story. I don't want to get too much into the plot. But what I really like about this series, book 1 and 2 at least, I like the mixing up of all these different genres. There's urban fantasy, and it's sort of detective, mystery, thriller parts, and bits of horror mixed in. And me coming from a more horror background, I really like the horror aspects that are sort of thrown in there, mixed in with all this fantasy and mystery and detective and whatnot. I feel like it's a little bit more in-depth than your just normal detective story. Maybe some of it is a bit predictable, but maybe not predictable or you didn't predict the right outcome for the reasons you thought maybe. It does have some depth to the story. There are a lot of different factions in this one. There's the police, there's Dresden, there are different groups of werewolves, since this is a werewolf story. There's a group called the Alphas, and there's like a motorcycle gang and another group of werewolves. And they're all sort of pitted against each other, trying to achieve their own goals and have their own ambitions and whatnot. And they end up all intertwining and, you know, all coming to a head and sort of fighting against each other. One aspect I really liked about the book, I'm not usually big on werewolves. They're just okay for me. But I really liked Jim Butcher's lore and world building wrapped around his werewolf mythology. And it's called Lupine Theramorph. And he actually has 4, at least in this book, there are 4 different types of werewolves. There's werewolves, hexen wolves, loup-garous, and lycanthropes. And they all have werewolf capabilities and powers and whatnot, but they're all a little bit different from each other. It's not like they all transform when the moon is full. And I really like that aspect, the sort of depth that it adds to the story. It brings a uniqueness to the story, and it's not just the same old, you know, the full moon comes out and they transform and rampage, and then the moon goes down, they turn back to humans. They all have, I won't say what each one does, I'll let you find out for yourself. But it was very interesting and brought a different level of enjoyment and depth to the story. And especially me coming from a D&D background, I love Dungeons and Dragons. I like these different twists and takes on sort of your normal lore for what a werewolf can be. And speaking of werewolves, they are absolutely brutal in this story. They're a force to be reckoned with. They wreak havoc, and they just absolutely destroy whatever gets in their way. I really like that aspect of the book, that the werewolves were a great nemesis, and they weren't to be taken lightly, and they were just absolutely brutal and savage, like a huge hulking wolf should be. Terrifying at times. And another thing I like about the series is Harry Dresden doesn't just come in and just, you know, wipe the slate clean with whoever's there. You know, he gets beat up, he gets knocked down, he gets bloodied, he gets knocked out, he almost gets killed. I mean, you know he's not going to die because there's like 15 books in the series, but that threat is still there. It feels like he could get killed, you know, within these different encounters. And I really like that aspect. Even though in the back of your mind, you know he's not going to die because there are other books after this. The threat level is still there. It still feels like he could possibly die. But, you know, the threat level is there for the other characters like Murphy and, you know, everybody else, the other police involved and whatnot. You know, it feels like they could get killed at any time because I don't know if they continue on with the series or not. So I really like the threat level and just the sheer brutality that the werewolves brought to the story. You know, me not being a huge werewolf fan myself. But the plot is really fun and interesting. Like I said, it weaves these different factions together, coming together to do things for their own ambitions and goals. And it was just a really nice, fun, entertaining, you know, magical horror type story. It was a whole lot of fun. Bob is back. Bob is the standout character. I really like Bob. He's sort of this spirit trapped within this skull that helps Harry out, you know, create potions and spells and gives him guidance and knowledge on. He gave him the knowledge on these different werewolves when he's doing his research and stuff. So the book is full of great side characters like Bob and Murphy. There's new characters introduced, like Tara West is here, and all the different werewolves in this story, they're all introduced new. It still has John Marconi, and he brings sort of the mob aspect to it, sort of the real world threat, real world Chicago threat, this mob mentality that I liked. You know, there's people with guns and stuff as well, not just all werewolves. So it's a supernatural threat and then the human threat. And I always like it when a book can combine those two, have a human threat and element to it, and then a more supernatural or horrific threat. And combining those two always makes for a fun and more entertaining story, I think, than if we're just focused on, you know, one type of threat. But overall, I did enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it as much as the first book. I liked it just a little bit less. If I had 2 nitpicks about it, it would be, and this is very minor plot spoilers, but in book 1, When Dresden is called in to help Murphy, somehow he's not able to divulge everything because he has these secrets to keep about this whole other world and the Never Never and the White Council, and he doesn't want to get Murphy too involved in that. He doesn't want her to be in danger, so he sort of holds back information. And in book 1, she thinks he's complicit with the crime and puts out a warrant, tries to arrest him. That happens again here in book 2. He doesn't want to tell her everything because he doesn't want to, have all these supernatural forces focused on her. So again, she arrests him in this one, and when that happened, I sort of eye rolled. I was like, okay, we've gone through this before. It's happening again. So I hope that's not a theme that continues throughout the series, where Murphy calls in Dresden to help, and then she tries to arrest him because she thinks he's involved. That'll just get stale and boring real quick. Another thing is anytime there is a female character on the screen or on the page, it always talks about how beautiful they are and how perky their breasts are and how their breasts are cut by their outfits and whatnot. And that got old really quick. I guess it's fine if you're first introducing that character, describing them what they look like and how pretty they are and beautiful they are and whatnot. But to do it every time they come back on the page got monotonous and boring and just wasn't needed. I like boobs as much as the next guy, but I don't need to be told about how perky this girl's boobs are every time she's on the page. I get it. You'd say it once. You don't need to keep saying it again. I guess I feel like it sexualized women just a little bit. I'm not a woman. I don't have their perspective on it. But for me, it got a little old, after the first 5 times it talked about it. I've heard that lessens as the series goes on, so we'll see. But it was just something I noticed. It occurred too much for me. It just sort of got old and a little bit boring to keep mentioning the same thing over and over again. Those are 2 just sort of minor nitpicks that I hope those things are corrected as the series goes forward and don't continue to occur and occur and occur. Like I said, I did like this one just a little bit less than book 1, so I'm going to give it 3.5 stars out of 5, rounded up to 4 for Amazon and Goodreads. It's still a lot of fun. There's a lot of magic and wizardry involved. We get a little bit more backstory about Dresden and just tiny bits more about like the White Council and the Never Never and these things that have been mentioned before that we still don't know too much about. Sort of slowly building up this world that Jim Butcher's creating, and I'm sure we'll get tons more information about those in the future. So yeah, this is still, it's fun, it's brutal, it's bloody, full of magic and mayhem, and it's just a really fun, entertaining ride. And that's all I have to say about it, really. I give it 3.5 out of 5 stars, rounded up to 4 for Amazon and Goodreads. I have finished book 3 already, Grave Peril. I know Nikki from I Read Past My Bedtime and Ramsey from Rajathon. I don't know who else is involved, but they are sort of having a Dresden read-along where they're reading 1 book a month. They finished book 4 this month. I'm going to try to read book 4 this month and finish so I can catch up and start book 5 with them next month. I'd like to join in on that read-along. And all the booktubers I mentioned, Leslie, Nikki, and Ramsey, I'll put links to all their channels down in the description. But yeah, this has been my review of Full Moon by Jim Butcher, book 2 in the Dresden Files series. Still a lot of fun, entertaining, lots of fun, gory werewolf action in this one. Well, that's all I have for you guys today, so thanks for spending your time with me. Again, my name is Brad, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.